Hello, everyone. I'm Anna Tragotsi. I'm an associate at MTG, and I've got here my colleague Olivia Minghella, senior associate at MTG, as to quite recently, so I'm very excited about that. And with us today, in recognition of International Women's Day, we've got two MTG legends, in general, legendary in the law field, Clare Maurice and Ceris Gardner, and we are going to have nice little chat with them today. We're going to try not to be too lordy. We're going to try to keep it spicy and fun. One bit of lordy, non-fun chat. This session is being recorded. So hopefully no one has a problem with that. We are going to ask for people to put in some questions in the question box. So please send all your questions. The juicier, the better. And we'll try to get to them. So are we ready to go? Clare, Ceris?
We are.
Excited?
Yeah. I'm so excited.
We actually thought we would start the session with a little bit of a visual of Ceris and Clare when they were our age. I mean, I know they still look our age, but so here we go.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, I think Ceris here, your hair is
it looks so black there. I know.
Yes. It is quite the look.
Obviously mine hasn't changed colour
At all. No, still the same as ever.
So this is both of you in the earlier stages of your legal careers, and we're going to come on to speak about the routes that you both had into law, which are different from one another, and that's very interesting. But sort of the logically prior question, I think, is why did you choose to go into law in the first place, particularly knowing at the time that it was such a male-dominated environment?
Okay, well, can we get rid of the photograph, please?
Yeah, I'm on it, but I'm still struggling with tech too, Claire. I may only be 30, it's still hard.
Mine was more straightforward than Ceris because I had a law degree and I started thinking, well, what was I going to do with my law degree? It wasn't as organised as anything, nothing like the 1980s. This was in the 70s, and I found I went to did a pupillage, mini pupillage. Thought that was great fun, but actually already had decided that it would look rather insecure, and I managed to get articles at Allen and Overy. But the main driver for all of this was that I'd already acquired very expensive habits. One of my aunts had introduced me to a very chic hairdresser, Aldo Bruno, in Motcombe Street, SW1, and in order to afford to pay for the hairdresser, I clearly had to generate a proper income. So in my head, I was going to make a lot of money as a lawyer. I was disabused because when I asked the partner at Allen Overy about my future, he did say, before I even arrived as an article clerk, he said, "You're not going to make any money, you know." So I said, well, that was a bit of a disappointment, but it was driven, I'm afraid, by thinking, do you know what? I like expensive things, and how am I going to afford it if I don't go out there and work hard? And a law degree looked like a passport, or certainly being a solicitor looked like a passport to affording those things. As you can see, I'm still having my hair done.
And it looks great, so you've clearly
Yes, 100%.
Okay, for me, the law chose me, really, not the other way around, because I was educated in Wales, and the only careers advice you had in Wales was if you're studying art subjects at university, you'll become a teacher. And so when I set forth to London to come to university here, I was reading Russian and German, and I was intending to be a teacher. I got waylaid from that because it was a 4-year course already, and 1 year they introduced a 1-year teachers training course which hadn't been in place before. I thought, there's no way I can take 5 years, with my poor parents supporting me, I've got to get a job. So the job I got was with the Capital Taxes Office. So I started life in the tax office for capital transfer tax in those days, not inheritance tax, but it was the forerunner. And what did they do? They sent the whole cohort, and I was in about 15 people, to a 6-month law course. So we learned all about tax, of course, but also trusts, tort, all the contract, that's the thing. And I thought, oh, I really quite like this. And as a result, I stayed there for a few years and then joined Allen and Overy as part of a recruitment drive they had for probate managers. So I wasn't qualified when I joined Allen and Overy.
You were headhunted.
Clearly. Didn't quite work. Yeah, not quite maybe, but yes.
But then you chose that. I mean,
So then after a year, the then senior partner, William Norris, asked if I'd ever thought of qualifying. And he said, I suggest you do so and we'll support you. So I then started what turned out to be quite a long process of qualifying without having a law degree to start with. So it took about 7 years in the end, one way or another, only because because I was one of the very few fee earners in the department at the time. We wanted to avoid me having to go around the firm doing articles. And so the only way of getting out of doing articles was to become a legal executive and pass their exams as well. So once that had all gone through, no articles, no training contract, as you'd call it now. And then I just could carry on practicing as a lawyer once I passed the exams.
Whereas I signed articles of clerkship with the same William Norris, and I had a magnificent well, it's hardly vellum, but it felt like that. And he promised to give me the sort of work I would need, and I promised to be a faithful servant, I think. And at the end, the 2 years, I was handed back my articles somewhere. But it was very much the apprenticeship of many centuries. No training contracts.
So you both get to first day. What did it feel like? Were you surrounded by basically all men, loads of suits, or were there actually quite a lot of women there? Did you tend to gravitate towards the women? Just slightly walk us through that.
Well, there weren't any women really. No, they actually they would be cross. But there was one other girl article clerk, and there were probably 2 or 3 associates. One in the litigation department, Julia Braybrook, she was very scary, and there was one in the conveyancing department, I think. So they were very thin on the ground, well, if not invisible, really. There were lots of women, but they weren't as acting as lawyers. They were all the support staff, so quite conventional, really. Yeah. Lots of secretaries in those days, because everybody had a secretary, which was absolutely. I don't think I did, but everybody else did. But I do remember being the object of some interest, and the early days of my articles, the first week, quite a lot of people in suits came to check me out, and I thought they were interested in my intellect, but who knows? But it was no, there weren't any women, and there certainly weren't any role models in that sense. You had to sort of make it up as you went along.
Yeah. Very male dominated. I think when I joined, it was a little bit easier because there had been a few more joiners who were females, but not many actually. And you're right, people did come along just to see what you looked like in the office. I had a couple of people who sort of randomly just turning up and seeing who you were and what you looked like, and it's very odd. But they got used to it in the end, the men. But grey suits, very much suits. There was no dress down whatsoever back then. So everyone was in suits and ties, and that was it. Very male.
But I did the other lady article clerk who became a firm friend, and she took me under her wing and indeed introduced me to my husband, or the man who became my husband. So we were great pals, and it was a a relief and a joy to have Sue there, because it was a very strange world. But I didn't have much experience of working in a proper office environment. I'd had some fairly menial jobs, but this was real life, if you like, and so I didn't really have anything to compare it with. So it was, but definitely suits. Looked very formal. Yes. And dark suits, unlike you and me, Anna. Not your pink and me and my red. And it was serious time, and but it was possibly easier in some ways, because I was the girl article clerk. So
everyone knew you.
So you were both treated as somewhat curiosities because of being women, which was so unusual. But Ceris, do you think that you were also treated potentially more in a way that was more challenging because you were also following a less traditional path, or was everybody kind of receptive to that?
I think in the department, which is the private client team, it made no difference, because I think the point there was that because I was one of the fee earning members of the team, that was all that was wanted. Keep the sort of clients happy, make sure the work comes in, you get the work done, and you're earning fees for the firm. So that didn't make any difference. I think elsewhere in the firm, they might have thought it was a bit odd that, who was this person and what was she doing and why wasn't she a lawyer? The interesting thing there, just so you know what was going on back then, because there were two men who were at the same level as me in terms of getting through their exams at the same time, and they were given articles. In other words, they were allowed to go around the firm. And I remember at the time thinking, there's something very wrong with this. Should I be doing something about it? Should I leave? Was I not being appreciated? But actually, I decided to stick it out. You mentioned sticking things out, and it didn't do me any harm, because they eventually left and I was made a partner. So.
But I think the other thing is that Ceris had knowledge that was very hard to come by, which was she understood the inner workings of the Capital Taxes Office, which was really important for us. Capital transfer tax was new, and it was really helpful to have somebody who had friends on the inside, so to speak. And in those days, you could pick up the phone and speak to people. So she brought something to the party that none of the rest of us had, and that was very, very important. But the team anyway weren't particularly. At one stage there were lots of men and me, but after a while more women joined. So exactly.
Did you feel at any time that you had to slightly curb your personalities in terms of the way you dressed, in terms of the way you acted, just so you could fit in? Or did you actually enjoy sticking out, be like, yes, I am a woman, and it's great?
Well, back then, women weren't allowed to wear trousers. Now, whether it was
half my outfit, Ceris.
I'm not sure if it was an actual dress code, but it was certainly implied that women were not allowed to wear trousers. Okay, so that was one thing. But Claire will corroborate this, because what we tended to dress very conservatively. So, I would wear black, sometimes grey if I was feeling very daring. Claire, I think didn't you wear dark suits? Yeah, there's always a suit of some, skirt suits, obviously not trouser suits. So yes, I think that was a bit of it wasn't a challenge, because it seemed that everywhere was like that then. It didn't seem
everybody was much more formally dressed.
Yeah.
I think for me the thing that I find extraordinary was that I was able to march around the city in high-heeled boots. I couldn't do that now. But it was that was quite a challenge, I think. I do remember being told by a lady in what we called the personnel department, not HR in those days, that I wasn't going to get anywhere if I insisted on wearing trousers. So it was, if it wasn't a rule, it was certainly expected. I don't think anybody cared, actually, but it was their sort of, that's not how you behave, that's not what you look like. Yeah. But the other things we did, we were reminiscing, as the junior lawyer, you always carried the briefcase. I mean, none of this laptop business. You know, I always carried the briefcase for the person with whom I was working, and and it was as you said.
Yeah, we never had any money. Yeah, the partners who would, you know, you went to meetings with, they never had any money on them. So you were always expected to have the money and to pay for taxis or whatever it may be. Always,
like the Queen or the King. So it was quite
amazing,
hierarchical in that sense. But I don't think I was necessarily treated any differently from the men either. They had to carry the briefcases and I had to find the money too.
Yeah.
It's just that I didn't go to the gym in those days, so it was a bit more of a struggle.
It could be very heavy, some of these. Bearing in mind that everything, don't forget, everything was hard copy then. There's none of this, not just carrying a laptop. They're heavy enough, I know, but you know, it wasn't that, and you could access all your papers. No, you had to take all your papers with you, no matter how many there might be. You know, it's quite funny.
A physical file. I mentioned
Physical
it
files.
the other day. I said, yes, we used to have pilot bags.
Yes,
Somebody
that's right.
looked at me as if I was sort of a numpty, but no, those very big briefcases. I mean, we had them when we came here,
nice.
in which you could carry
Definitely.
about 4 or 5 files. So but you know, that's obviously technology has changed all of that. So
And how?
I would say. So as you progressed in your careers and you were no longer kind of brand new day one, and you started sort of holding the floor more, did you find that you experienced imposter syndrome? And do you think that your male counterparts were experiencing it in the same way, or do you think that it was influenced by your being women?
Tubes.
Of course, we never used the expression imposter syndrome.
No,
at the
never.
time.
It's a new one.
I think I think becoming a partner was the moment when I possibly felt I had imposter syndrome, because there weren't any other women partners, so I was the first, and so I used to think, well, they're making me a partner because it's in the private client department, or actually it's called the trust department in those days.
Yes, it was.
And that, so you know, it's not real Allen and Overy, if you like. But then I decided, I reassured myself that they wouldn't have let me through the door if they didn't think I was going to be I was going to pull my weight, so to speak. But I don't know. I think certainly a lot of people, when I first qualified, some various clients, I think they were teasing, but because I'm quite an easy person to tease, you know, I leap out of the water like a trout. They used to say, "Are you really qualified as a solicitor?" I mean, of course I am. And so much so that one of the partners made a badge for me, which said, "I really am one." So it was, there was a novelty, but after a while that wears off. And I guess we all suffer from the same lack of confidence at various times. And so we didn't spend an awful lot of time talking about it.
No,
I think that's probably the difference between then and now. You just had to get on with it.
Yeah.
For good or ill. I don't know.
Yeah, no, absolutely, for good or ill. No, I agree entirely. All the same thing. I've been reading up on imposter syndrome, not for this, but because it's been there've been some articles about it recently, and you sort of recognise it a bit in yourself. But as you said, we didn't have a name for it in those days. Anyway, when I was made a partner, what did I think? I was just thoroughly pleased. You know, I was so happy. It was a great moment. And yes, I think we had to work very hard to get there, but at the end of the day it was a really good thing. And by the way, I didn't expect even my male trainees to carry my bags when we went to meetings or to pay for taxis when I perfectly capable of having money in my own bag, you know. So yes, I think imposter syndrome, it's not something I really recognize hugely in myself, to be honest.
Now, I was told that when I became a partner, there was a door which said partners only. And I was told that I was absolutely not allowed to go into that, even though I was a partner, because it was the gents.
So what did you do, Claire? How did you?
I had to go into nobody made a special ladies for me. So there you go.
That's true. But, yeah, I remember those days too.
But I think that we're all the same in the sense it doesn't matter what your gender you are facing. This momentous occasion when you become a partner in a law firm, and you're faced with the challenges of building a practice and leading others and growing your team, and I don't feel that was gender specific, if you like. It was these were the same. I mean, Richard Turner became a partner about 6 months after I did, and I'm sure he was similarly, he's much cleverer than I am, so, but he was probably struggling in the same way to how we were going to do it. And my sort of boss at the time told me he'd handed over some clients, and he said they were red 2s and black 3s, and it was my job to build them into jacks, queens and kings. And that was a nice way of putting it.
Yeah.
But I think it's I don't think it's very different now from what it was then.
No, not in that sense.
Yeah.
I think I feel that I was supported by the other partners in the team, because when you are first made a partner, your biggest worry, going back to the imposter syndrome, is how on earth am I going to build a practice? But of course, because I'd been the senior associate, although we didn't have that tag then, on many of the partners' files, it was almost just quite an easy transition on some of them, because you'd already become the advisor that the client expected to see on their matters. So that was quite a good transition, and that we're hoping to try. We do that today, don't we? So that doesn't change really.
We do have a question. So what was it like when you first went into the partners' dining room in the days when there was still such a thing?
Oh, I shall never ever forget it, because you had to go there was a sort of buffet where you went to help yourself, obviously, and he wasn't the senior partner then, but he was a bigger personality, or larger than life, Bill Tudor John. As I approached the soup tureen, he said, "Well, let's see whether you're going to be able to carry this to the table without spilling it." Sort of really warm welcome. It was, I mean, they talked about rugby on Mondays, but I can listen to that. It was pretty male, but it was useful place to hear what was going on in the rest of the firm. It wasn't very good for your waistline, because there weren't too many healthy. I mean, I don't remember
healthy options. No.
Good hearty food for middle-aged men. Probably.
Yes, definitely. No, I remember when I first went in, it was a scary moment, I have to say. And I'm sure, I can't remember who it was though, but somebody actually took me so that, I didn't have to feel, oh my goodness, what's going on here. But yes, it was quite an experience, because, as Claire said, so male dominated that, and of course they all knew each other from way back. They'd been partners together for many years, and they knew what each other was working on, and they were full of chat on that, and then of course sport. But yeah, it was really quite daunting in a way.
But everybody obviously was very welcoming.
Yeah,
and it was certainly when my partnership was announced, it was a seismic moment, and there were many more women and trainees at the time, so flooding to my door. And then one of the litigation partners tipped up, and he said to me, "So did you ask to see a copy of the accounts, Claire?" I said, "No." He said, and I clearly felt that I hadn't done my due diligence. But
yes, that was a theme, wasn't it? Yeah.
And as there were increasing numbers of women as time passed, did you find that women were supportive of one another, or did women feel generally that there wasn't enough room at the top for too many of you, so it was kind of every woman for herself?
Because we were in very different departments, most of my experience was in the private client team, and I hope we weren't like that. We did promote Jennifer Chambers, Bella, and so I hope we weren't. Around the rest of the firm, I don't think so. I think I don't know. Broadly speaking, the culture at Allen & Overy was certainly during time I was there, collaborative and wanting to make everybody succeed. But I don't, it can sometimes it can be interpreted as not being helpful. I was chastised by partners who came after me when I only managed to negotiate 4 months maternity leave. And I was given a roasting. Why didn't you get more? Well, there wasn't a maternity policy at the time. There was a policy for sabbaticals, so we piggybacked off that. So 4 months sabbatical. So I went on a sabbatical, although it wasn't entirely relaxing, I don't think. But I never felt. Well, I hope you have to ask the people who came after me. I hope that I was there with a helping hand, rather than pulling up the ladder.
Exactly. It wasn't the situation of pulling up the ladder, no, that's for sure. And that showed, obviously, because we still have so many more female partners than male partners, even in the firm at the moment. And that was all started at Allen and Overy, when in that private client team, as it came to be known, there were quite a few women who were hopefully encouraging and helping others to the partnership level as well.
We have another question from Rupert now. Claire, your promotion as first female partner, would you say it was welcomed by all partners?
I was told that there was one partner who said there would be a woman partner over his dead body, and I didn't kill him, but we did get there.
Yeah.
And it was, I mean, whether it was said in jest or not, we're still friends. And but I think it was, again, it was strategic, because Peter, who I work for, said, you know, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I think I'd like to become a partner. So he was very, he worked very hard getting support around the firm. So according to him, that when it came to the vote, it went through on the nod, but there was probably a lot of noise which I didn't hear about. But no, there'll be a woman partner, and Allen Overy over my dead body was a great line at the time.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how many other people thought of it like that, but it was it made a good story. And whenever I see the author of this, we laugh.
He knows you know.
Yeah.
Very funny. Yeah.
So clearly, being a woman wasn't always straightforward if you were facing comments like that, and presumably on occasion was a disadvantage. But did you ever think, I can use it to my advantage too, and I will?
Yes, very much so. I think it can be very helpful. Number one, obviously, we stood out in those early days because Claire was the first, as you say. I came along a few years later, and there, in that short period, there were quite a few more females made up at that time. But of course, you can turn it to your advantage because of the way you deal with people, apart from anything else. And in the early days, yes, I would walk into a room with the partner, and they would think I was the secretary or there to provide the tea and the coffee, and it was a bit, or to take the notes, whichever. And so you had to get over that one by making sure you were heard, number one, and that, you know, so for example, Peter, as an example, he was very good in the sense that when you went to a meeting with him, he would ensure that you were the one giving the advice while he was there to, if you like, manage the relationship, shall we say. And that really does boost your confidence and your ability to get out there and, you know, be the one who's advising, which is great. That really worked well. Otherwise, I'm not really sure how I use my wiles, my womanly wiles. It was more not people, male clients tended to respect a woman coming into the room without realizing that you might be the actual person giving the advice. So, you know, that in a way put them on a bit of a back foot, because when you're the one who strides up to them, and, you know, hey, I'm the partner, that can take them back a little bit, and you know, you've got a little bit of a foothold there to you know, impress them, flatter them, cajole them, whatever it may be. But yes, I think there are ways and means of using it to advantage. Claire, you probably got better stories.
I'm not sure about that, but the obvious one is that you're more memorable. I used to be, because there weren't very few other women around, so people remembered you, and as long as you were able to get your voice heard, you hoped that they were listening to you. I don't think I've never, for the most part, I've never struggled to be heard, but I think it gave one a bit of an advantage. I think that people sometimes underestimate you, but yes, it's quite a long time ago now, but it was fun being the only woman in a room of men, bluntly, and but I did have my moments, and I was chatting earlier to Ceris and I remember turning up at the offices of Morgan Grenfell, a very blue chip merchant bank, coming to see. In fact, he was a very senior director, and I took with me my article clerk, my trainee at the time, who was a distinguished looking man. And when we walked in the door, the doorman ignored me and said to Tim, "And who are you going to see, sir?" So I had to say, actually, it's me, and I'm coming to see Mr. X. But it's quite often it was others who were less open to the idea. But this is sort of 1985 too, so just about the time, just as Big Bang was happening, you know, the Americans arriving changed the landscape dramatically. It did, for sure. But so that became much slicker and less old boy, really, less old boy world.
Yeah. In other words, what happened in the city was that the long boozy lunches changed rapidly under the influence of the American invasion, and so no longer were people going out for these big long lunches and then going straight home to the country afterwards. By the way, the whole dynamic changed in the city. I think it was amazing how much it changed pretty quickly, actually, in my sort of memory. So very interesting.
The other thing that people never get is that there were no shops. There was nowhere to go buy. There was no Tesco or Waitrose or anything. That's where you had a weekly shop. You had to do your shopping at the weekends, and there was fine fare, I remember. Certainly no clothes shops, absolutely nothing. So it was physically a very different place, and lots of banking halls, and just not very many women on the streets, I suppose. It was quite different, and very the opportunity. There were not very many restaurants in my memory either, but there were one or two favourite ones.
Yeah, some good ones.
Used to go to the pub quite a lot at lunchtime. How I managed that, I can't. But the Watling in Bow Lane and the Golden Fleece, but I can't. The bread and cheese or something, very unhealthy.
Yeah.
The other thing was that the office was locked at 6 p.m. So the very large building.
That's the dream, Claire.
I know.
That's a dream.
It's
true.
That proved to be a bit of a challenge, because if you left and you'd forgotten something after 6, you couldn't get back in again. But and I had to handwrite stuff for my the senior lawyer I was sitting for, and had to get it typed by the secretaries, and didn't have. I used to be quite good at dictation. That was the way of getting stuff done.
Had to master that.
So a very different world.
And I remember going back to the 6 o'clock finish. I once rang a client. You can get out. You can get out of the office, but you couldn't get back in. That was the point. I rang a client at 6 o'clock one night to ask for some information, and a lovely client. She was horrified that I was still in the office at 6 o'clock. What are you doing in the office at 6 o'clock? And
I'm starting my day.
Those were the days.
But it did change.
Oh yes, rapidly. Yeah.
Mansplaining. I'm going to go for it with this question. I think it's something Liv and I have talked about before. We still feel like it happens to us all the time. I think especially because we look quite young. Was that the case for you? And I assume the answer is yes. And how bad was it? And what did you do? What's your strategy to essentially stop the mansplaining? Take control of the room.
Did I have a strategy? I'm not sure. We didn't have that expression back then anyway, so I'm just trying to think of some examples of mansplaining. I suppose, first of all, yes, of course it happened, but we probably didn't react to it in the way that we do now, because it's such an obvious thing now that people are not happy with. But back then, I think we put up with a lot more than we would today. Let's put it that way. In terms of how we dealt with it, I think most of the time I just let it wash over me, because you think, what's the point of making a big fuss about it? It's not going to get you anywhere. It's sort of,
I mean, I think that's a good tip, because I get really mad, which probably doesn't help.
I just say, what a silly old what's it, and just carry on with what I'm talking about to him or her, as the case may be. You're saying mansplaining, but it was also, women could be doing the same, but
yeah,
in the sense of males, yeah.
Yes, I suppose I just thought they were being rather pompous and, shrug my shoulders and just get on with it. I think, like in every walk of life, you have to pick your battles, and don't take somebody on just because you cross, and live to fight another day, and just be sad for them, really. Be sad for them. But I did find that the attitudes of many of the older partners at Allen Overy changed quite dramatically when their daughters were coming into the workplace.
Yeah.
Suddenly,
That's
people would say, goodness, my daughter has had this most extraordinary experience, and how shocking it was. And you sort of shrug your shoulders and go, okay. I remember my father worked in industry and bulk chemicals, and he recruited some lady engineer, and he suddenly became the greatest feminist on this planet, because he was so shocked by the way in which people were treating, and she was an engineer in a bulk chemical industry, so can you imagine what that must have been like? But I did find that people stopped being quite so sort of there and well, do you really understand sort of approach. But it happens still.
Yes, it does.
And
sure.
So I think it's probably a personality problem for the other person, really.
That's a good way to put it.
So just let it wash over you, Anna. Just let it wash over you.
Pomposity, lovely word. Yeah.
When you were progressing in your careers, what kind of a support network did you have in terms of in the office? I know you've talked about Peter and how supportive he was at you, Clare, but in the office and also out of the office, and how important was it to you to make sure you had that sort of solid support foundation at home and in your personal lives to ensure that you could sort of give everything you needed to give to your careers?
Big question.
Well, yes. Well, my husband's not watching.
Well, actually, if anybody ever asks advice, nobody necessarily listens to it, but choosing your life partner is probably the most important decision, because if they're not happy with what you do, then you really had it. And I saw a number of marriages that, or women who gave up the unequal struggle because their partner was expecting them home, and it just wasn't, the lifestyle didn't fit. I think so. So Ian is not watching today, but I'm sure he would puff his chest out, because he really it was a huge support.
Yeah,
I was quite disappointed that so many women who I started out with, if you like, fell by the wayside. They gave up the unequal struggle, not just in the law. So I could count on the fingers of one hand, really, contemporaries who forged ahead. So there wasn't much support there. But actually, do you know what? It was a very busy time. If I wasn't working, I was at home, and as you know, I had 2 children, and it's hard to fit everything in when you've got small children. But I did have I had nannies, which were fantastic, and still in touch with some of them. So that's quite weird. But we couldn't have, weird in the sense that they were 21 when they came to look after the children, and now they're in their 50s. How did that happen? So, but no, a lot of support from that.
Yeah.
I think I didn't have, my parents weren't around, so they weren't doing childcare. But I think I think if people have got that network, then they're very lucky. As long as the parents are supportive. And I certainly had a few run-ins with my mother. Why are you doing this? What's the point? Tickets to the Royal Opera House. So I think it's hard if you don't have support from your parents. But yeah, I think they were very proud, but sometimes questioned what on earth I was doing.
Yes, true. No, for me, the 80s was predominantly studying and actually getting through all the exams, because having sort of got onto the track in the early 80s, and then by 1988, yeah, that's right, 1988, I was qualified. But of course, it was that period in between that took up most of my time. And yes, I got a very supportive husband, had a very supportive husband at the time. He's still the same husband. And I think you do need that support. But also have to say, Allen and Dover did not have the reputation of being the most friendly of the big firms at the time, because they were supportive. Certainly in the private client team, they were supportive, and I think wider as well, because I think they did wish me well, wish the people who were going through the exams well, and I think that did pay off, yeah, and did come through.
You pick your firm and your husband or partner carefully. Is the conclusion.
Exactly. Very true.
We used to have these partners dinners, and where it was a Christmas party, and you'd bring your partner. I mean, in those days it was husband and wife along, yeah. And Ian said, he said, well, you may have been the first woman partner, but I was the first male spouse. And the first one we went to, the widow of a deceased partner came up and said, I don't think we've met, have we? In which department are you in? He said, I'm not. I'm the husband of the first lady partner. And she nearly had the vapors. So, I don't think Anthony would have approved of that. So, there were, we all had our roles to play. And, but I think it's, as I say, I think it's just as hard now for people if you're combining work and business development with families. There are really not enough hours in the day, and I applaud everybody who can do that. But I do know that it requires grit and stamina and a real commitment, because there are lots of reasons to give up on it. So I applaud everybody, and I'm very pleased with people who can continue to do this.
Yeah, and we didn't have any of the technology back in the day. I feel that we did work hard, but going back to this thing about you should be home by 6, leaving the office by 6 o'clock doesn't sound it, does it? But if you think about what was going on back then in terms of the work-life balance query, the big thing was we didn't have email. You sent a letter out, and you could wait for several days before you had a reply. So looking back now, it seems as though it must have been a gentler pace, but I don't think it felt like that at the time, not to me anyway. But looking back now, you can see we didn't have any of these quick turnarounds, clients expecting a response within hours rather than days, that kind of thing. So yeah, it is very different, which is why I agree that it's not necessarily all rosy for you. Violet.
Yeah, well, also, you know, the tax books, we had two
Mm.
yellow books and an
Mm.
orange book,
Oh, yeah.
and I don't know how many yellow books there are now. So
Mm.
there just wasn't the sort of volume of legislation you had to
True.
get to grips
Yeah.
with,
Yeah.
and so it was less demanding, I think, in that sense. But I think the themes are the same. People want to do their best for their clients, and they want to shine personally, and it all requires hard work. And I did work most weekends, but it was I came to the office quite a lot, so it was easier for that.
Yeah,
but you've got to it didn't come easily. You had to keep at it, she says.
That's true. Yeah.
Then we know the story of how you founded MTG, and I wanted to ask you what you've done at MTG that you're most proud of in terms of things that will help future generations of lawyers, and particularly of women lawyers. Certainly, you know, we look up to you both very much, as I know did all the other lawyers in the firm, but perhaps particularly the women for whom you've paved the, you know, you have paved the way for us. And are there sort of concrete examples of how you've done that you're particularly proud of?
Yep.
Partnership. Remember that.
Well, yes.
It's good. I think you say it.
Well, we
a joke.
it was Rich Turner and Corinne drafted the partnership agreement, and it was the feminine was used rather than the masculine, so everything was her and she. I mean, it was a joke, as in it was Richard's joke on us, or probably Corinne's joke actually, but it made a good strap line in for the publicity. I mean, that's sort of light-hearted thing. What if we? I don't know. I think it would be very bold to claim responsibility for anything in particular, because it has been a very collaborative experience. When we set off, the six of us, it was one of those moments where you suddenly found that you not only did you have a ship, but you were able to steer it the way you wanted to do it. So I hope that the culture was sort of set then of being open and collaborative and respectful. I think that's the case, and I hope it is. You'll tell me, I'm sure, if I've got it wrong. And that we should be having fun. I mean, you may not regard it as fun, but it's in many ways the environment is very different from other firms. So it's been having great clients and wonderful colleagues. There are bumps in the road, inevitably, but it's because life isn't straightforward. But I think it's that's what I would hope is the legacy, if you like, a great place to work with fantastic clients and interesting work. But I don't know.
Agreed. Yeah, collegiate. I think what we've always said from the very beginning is we wanted to build a firm that was in our image, if you like. I don't mean it's sort of, you know, everyone looking like us. No, God forbid. But more that collegiality, collaborative way of working. You know, not the, you know, oh, I want to do that work because it'll be good for my figures. No, if Claire's better at that kind of thing, transfer it to Claire. You know, that kind, just to be free with the way we deal with it, because, you know, we should all be working to one end, it seems to me, and that's what I like about the firm, and I hope and pray that we can continue to build on that.
I mean, the focus should be on the client. We all say that. I can't imagine there's a firm out there that doesn't say exactly the same, but I hope we deliver on it. And I think the other thing that I hope we do is we do acknowledge that that we're not perfect, and as my daughters always complain that it looks as if everything is going like clockwork, and it's suggested that I ought to show that there are moments when things are not quite as one might have wanted, but that's difficult. But, you know, things do go wrong, and as we know, it's how you deal with them that sorts the sheep from the goats. So it's a question of, I guess, leadership really. But I if people want to come and work and clients want to come and use this, that's great. If it's not a legacy project in that sense, or somebody said it was a vanity project of mine, which I thought was incredibly rude. But yeah, oh wow, but that wasn't the plan. Was we had a great practice, and we had fantastic people, and we wanted to keep everybody together, and that's why we set off back in 2009. So it's been well, whenever I say it's been fun, everybody looks at me as though I'm rather sad, but it's been a blast. So thank you very much. We couldn't do it without you.
Exactly.
I think we have time for one last question, and it's the one we briefly discussed before this, and it is, what advice would you give your younger self?
Okay. Looking back, I suppose I would have preferred to have qualified faster than I did, but at the time it was one of those things that I didn't really go back to, rather nice earning the money. I didn't really want to have to go back to being a student again full time and existing on a grant. So it worked perfectly. But in terms of, that's the only, if I, je ne regrette rien kind of thing. So if that was the only thing I regret, that's not a problem, because it got me where I wanted to be and have enjoyed being for the rest of my career so far. And otherwise, I suppose I would say to myself, one thing I do remember is when I was walking from the very first day to the Capital Taxes office, I remember saying to myself, I really don't want to be here. This is not what I want to do in life. I'm going to give it 3 months, then I'm off. And so, of course, then the 6-month law course came along, which is why I say, don't close any doors onto yourself, because it's interesting how that was how I found my path to the law, and I would never have ever contemplated it before. It was didn't even feature in my thinking as a student. So there we go.
Very profound. I don't know. I think I was given some wise advice from a partner at Allen and Overy, which, when I was sort of simpering and saying, oh, I've been so lucky, what an amazing thing it's been to become a partner in Allen and Overy, and he gave me a brutal response, which was, you make your own luck. And I think that's true, and that life presents opportunities to you, and it's for you to decide which one you seize, or as he described it, walking down a corridor and doors open and close. And I think it was, I failed to get into Oxford, or Oxford really were obviously completely negligent and didn't recruit me. And I remember being told at the time by my history teacher, whom I blamed for all of this, of course, that these things were meant. And so I think that was quite a scarring experience to be rejected. So I think a bit of rejection is never a bad thing, but ultimately it's up to you, and make the best of it. And so when we set up MTG, we didn't have to do that. I could have retired, I guess, or we could have all gone our different ways. And I'm sure as a group we would have been welcome. In fact, I know lots of people were on the email, why haven't you joined us? But it just seemed like the right thing to do, was to, why wouldn't you? Why not? And let's give it a go. And as we know, it was really ours to lose, because we had the book of business from Allen and Overy and great people, and it was that was, I'm rambling now, but basically life is full of opportunities, and it's up to you to seize them and work hard. Nothing comes.
I was going to say, Claire, I was like, you definitely worked, but you both did so hard.
So, it doesn't come just by, well, you have to put effort in, see.
And you still work very hard, which is why we're all still here.
Some might say less hard.
I don't know about that. You both seem to always be online. So I do think you work equally hard.
Well, thank you both. It's been so interesting to hear your stories, and we're very grateful that you've taken the time, and I hope other people have also found it as interesting and enlightening as we have. I think we're supposed to say, Anna, aren't we, that this is the first in a rebooted MTG Meet the Expert series that will be coming monthly from now on. So please keep an eye on your inboxes, and the next invitation will be dropping soon.
Thank you
Thank you very much.